Welcome to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we aim to take you to the heart of ag policy. I'm Spencer Chase. Our guest this week is House Ag Committee Republican Brad Finstad of Minnesota, who joins us to talk Farm Bill, government funding, and more. But first, here's this week's headlines. A federal judge vacated registrations for the herbicide dicamba, leaving the product in limbo for the upcoming growing season. The ruling was issued on procedural grounds after a judge ruled the Environmental Protection Agency did not afford the proper notice and comment period when it allowed over-the-top usage on cotton and soybeans in 2020. EPA officials had previously allowed dicamba usage to continue after another court pulled its registration during a growing season. An EPA official says the agency is still working to fully understand the implications of the ruling. USDA is expecting net farm income to decline for a second straight year. The department projects net farm income and net cash farm income will both drop by more than 25% this year. After adjusting for inflation, the projected $116.1 billion net farm income would be about 2% lower than the 20-year average. The news comes as producers seem worried about lower returns. According to the latest Ag Economy Barometer from Purdue University and the CME Group, 28% of farmers pointed to lower commodity prices as their biggest concern for their operations. And finally, Democrats on the House Ag Committee released their Farm Bill principles. The Democratic minority does not want any cuts to projected nutrition assistance or Inflation Reduction Act funding to pay for boosting other parts of the Farm Bill. House Ag Republicans have pointed to both funding sources as ways to pay for Farm Bill priorities. Congressman Brad Finstad is the chair of the House Ag Subcommittee with jurisdiction over nutrition programs. To start our conversation, we asked him how the committee can resolve its funding impasse.
I think it's, first of all, good news that we're finally very clearly seeing on paper what the priorities of the Democrats are. You know, we in the House, as far as the Republican conference, have been working hard for the last year and a half, listening to people, listening to farmers, ranchers, rural folks from all over the country, trying to put this together and make sure the Farm Bill is for them and by them. And we were a little bit unsure of where the Democrats would come out in regards to their priorities. So it's about time. We're happy to see it. And more specifically to the nutrition title, I mean, I think we've been clear all along. Our look at the pay-fors, you know, you can't just say you want everything, but you're not willing to say how you want to pay for anything. And so we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is and looking at the Thrifty Food Plan. Not a single recipient of SNAP will lose benefits. So we have to be crystal clear on that. It is really just taking back some of that power of the purse, power that the legislative branch has from the executive branch. It will make a better program in the long run if we take a look at the Thrifty Food Plan.
Mm-hmm. So I want to borrow on your position as the chair of the subcommittee on House Ag with jurisdiction over SNAP and other nutrition programs. What are your Republican colleagues coming to you and asking for in this upcoming Farm Bill in that position?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of saw where our position was, and that was in the debt ceiling vote that we had months ago. I think the SNAP conversation was really had then in regards to, adult, able-bodied folks to the age of 54, 59. That conversation happened, and we had agreements, a bipartisan agreement on some of those adjustments that needed to happen in the SNAP program. So what we're seeing now is don't expand the program, don't make it more lucrative for folks to not work, really get back to the core principles of making sure that this is a hand up, not a handout program. And then moreover, make it more efficient and effective so we can make sure we're getting the best bang for the buck. So we're not, folks from my side of the aisle aren't coming to us and saying we need to cut. They're saying let's preserve, protect, and make sure that we're getting this to where it needs to go.
Farm Bill math being what it is, how do you get over the politics of just the visual of pursuing reforms within the nutrition title to then pursue expansion of the commodity title, increase reference prices, things like that? That's some tricky politics that you could potentially be wading into there.
It's tricky politics, but also it just is going to take honest math. And we have to be honest with each other that we can't want all of these different additions or upgrades to some of these current programs that we have in the current Farm Bill without being willing to talk about how are we going to pay for it. So again, when the Democrats have now recently issued their priorities, my I guess my ask to them would be, all right, come now with what are your ideas for some pay-fors? You can't just say we want to protect and grow all of these programs. You have to tell us how are we going to pay for that. And that's, again, where I'm proud of the chairman, G.T. Thompson, and the ideas that he's thrown out there. And he's been very open to this, saying, these are our ideas, come to the table and let's figure out what we can agree on. And I think that's the honest math that this country needs.
We'll have more from Congressman Finstad right after this.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Regenerative poultry production is a process by which nature can actually recapture and restore the energy that is being taken out of a space.
Farm Credit helped Rahi build his dream of regenerative poultry farming and encouraging fellow immigrants to find community in agriculture.
Nothing beats a farm. I'm just pursuing happiness.
Learn more at farmcredit.com/beginning.
Welcome back. Congressman Brad Finstad says the House floor action, or lack thereof, this week points to the need for bipartisanship in the upcoming Farm Bill.
So let's just take a look at what we've been able to successfully pass over the last year and a half. And it has been things that have taken a large amount of bipartisan support. And so we have a lot going for us in the farm community and the Ag Committee. It has been historically a bipartisan product. And so I think if we want a roadmap for success, we can look at the recently passed tax bill that had over 340 votes, bipartisan votes. I mean, that was a recipe for how to get things done. And I think if we can stay true to that on the Farm Bill side of things, we will see a bipartisan product move. There might be some, floor procedural shenanigans that happen, whether it's, passing a rule or not passing a rule or doing it under suspension. But the fact remains that it's going to have to be a bipartisan bill to get it done.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about a piece of legislation that you've introduced recently with Congresswoman Slotkin addressing some cybersecurity measures in agriculture. Can you just walk us through why that piece of legislation you thought was important to introduce?
So I also have the honor, besides sitting on the Ag Committee, I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and we, are constantly in a posture of assessing our threats and potential threats, and really trying to figure out where are we from a military standpoint planning the next 30 years. And what I have found missing in a lot of those conversations is the agriculture sector. I'm a firm believer that food security is national security. And when we look at the cyber attacks and the hacks that have been attempted in recent history, more specifically around the energy sector, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say the food sector could be very vulnerable and could be next in regards to some cyber security shenanigans. So my hope with this bill is to make sure that we are doing the proper exercises, that we have multiple agencies with multiple jurisdictions making agriculture a priority, everything from the farm to the table type approach. But we have a lot of high-tech agriculture that's happening in this country now. And when we do that, we become vulnerable from cyber attacks.
Mm-hmm. Seems like a couple of years ago, this topic was much more prevalent in policy discussions, in agricultural circles. Do you think cybersecurity and the threat that it poses to agriculture specifically is getting its due level of attention?
That's why we introduced this bill, to make sure we can try to amplify that and to really scream from the mountaintops that don't forget about us in agriculture. We might be a small percentage of the overall population of this country, but the last time I checked, everyone eats. And we need to make sure that we're still able to provide that, reliable, safe, healthy food that we are so good at doing in this country. And again, it becomes a national security issue. So we're going to make sure we continue to pound the drum on this and have agriculture have a seat at the table when it comes to these conversations.
I want to wrap up talking about government funding. We do see that you and your colleagues have about a month to get something figured out on that front before the current funding situation does expire. What's your level of confidence that you and your colleagues will be able to avoid a government shutdown in early March?
It's been a roller coaster. We've seen this play out a couple times already. I will say that patience is wearing thin with most members. there is a strong hallway conversation that's happening amongst members saying, it's time that the adults in the room stand up and try to figure this out. And what we really have to be concerned about is that it's not just the appropriation bills and the spending bills that we're talking about. It's really the trickle effect of, how are we going to get a farm bill done if we don't have the appropriation process locked up? How do we grow the confidence in our national security and our military if we're constantly operating under a continuing resolution? How do we give confidence to the private sector to keep investing in things when we are kind of willy-nilly trying to patchwork our way through a budget? So, a lot of those conversations are becoming more amplified, and I'm seeing a little bit more seriousness in it. I think, quite frankly, people are sick of politics, and we need to throw the R on our sweater and the D on our sweater aside and start wearing the USA on our sweater and trying to figure some of these things out for the American public.
Very good. Well, a month yet to be seen how that process will unfold. Will those adults in the room be a little bit more vocal this time around? We shall see. Congressman Finstad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back to hear from this week's panel, but first, our Hannah Pegel has a report on where crop insurance checks are being cashed in this week's Map It Out.
New information from USDA's Risk Management Agency shows crop insurance indemnity payments are the highest in a handful of areas. Indemnities are paid to farmers when their crop yields come in less than the production guaranteed in a crop insurance policy. This map shows the most recent numbers on a county-by-county basis as of the end of January. You can see payments are highest in counties throughout Texas, Florida, California, Washington, and Kansas. Many citrus crops on southern and central Florida were destroyed last year by Hurricane Ian, and California was hit by several storms. Drought conditions impacted many producers in Texas and Kansas. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Hannah Pagel.
The Senate and House Ag Committees are busy working on the next Farm Bill, which will cover commodities, specialty crops, livestock, and more. This legislation will impact every farmer, rancher, and rural business for the next 5 years. Make sure you don't miss insights and analytics that only Agri-Pulse and its top-notch team of well-connected experts can provide. Register today for a free trial at agripulse.com and click the subscribe button, or email us at pam@agri-pulse.com. You don't want to miss this Farm Bill coverage.
Agriculture Future of America is a nonprofit building transformational leaders in food and agriculture. AFA prepares college students to join the workforce as innovative and engaged young professionals who will shape the future of agriculture. Head to agfuture.org to find out how you can get involved.
Did you know Agri-Pulse has all your favorite podcasts, including Open Mic, Newsmakers, and Drive Time? Take us wherever you go. Subscribe at agripulse.com or on Spotify, Google Play, or Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we are going to have a panel discussion now to discuss some of the important news of the week, joined for that conversation by Brandon Lips with Caprock Strategies and Mike Seyfert with the National Grain and Feed Association. I appreciate both of you taking the time. And Brandon, I want to go to you first because right now we're seeing continued talks on the Farm Bill on Capitol Hill, not a lot of public action on that front. And it does seem that nutrition is one of the big issues, big outstanding issues. We see the House Democrats roll out their policies this week. They say that is a account that just cannot be touched. I wonder, from someone who has worked on these programs before, how did Democrats and Republicans get past this nutrition spending impasse?
Certainly, when you look at the Farm Bill and the percentage of the Farm Bill baseline that's in nutrition, it's always a big issue. It should always be a big issue that's discussed anytime government is spending that amount of money. It's also a very important program that's very important to so many Americans. The Farm Bill is about ensuring that we all have access to food and fiber in this country, and the nutrition title is about ensuring that we all have access to food on our table. Something that's universally agreed to by the Ag Committee, some differences in opinions on how we get there. I think what you're seeing right now is something that you've seen back in 2014 when I was working on the Ag Committee, and certainly farm bills of all time, is folks starting to draw lines in the sand about where they are on issues. I think that makes it difficult to get a farm bill. Ag Committee leadership has always figured out a way to get over those. Folks need to be careful, not drawing lines in the sand on CBO baselines, but making sure that the big task that Ag Committee leadership had, that our farmers have what they need to produce the food and that all Americans have access to food,
Well, sticking with the subject of nutrition here, are there rooms for programmatic reforms that would not cut benefits for users of the program, in your mind?
There's always room for those. Unfortunately, it's hard to get down in those discussions. When time for Farm Bill comes, folks tend to want to move quickly to get to the need. Obviously, Farm Bill doesn't move until we have great pressure to do that. But when you look at the fact that in just over 20 years ago, there were 17 million people on SNAP, and now we're at 41, almost 42 million people on SNAP. How are we still having double digit insecurity in this country with the number of people we have on SNAP, with the increase in spending? It would be wise of legislators and folks in this town to step back and say, how can we serve people better? How can we help them move to a place that they don't need the program? But for folks on the program, why are we still having double digit food insecurity in this country?
Mm-hmm. Well, and Mike, I want to go to you now. Borrowing on your experience on Capitol Hill as well, we see not only the nutrition issues that Brandon and I just discussed, but also some differences of opinion in spending on commodity programs and how to go about funding some potential increases there. I wonder, as you assess this kind of through the lens of a former staffer as well as a commodity group leader now, what do you think is the prospect of lawmakers being able to get over these differences of opinion and still advance a farm bill yet in 24?
Well, Spencer, one thing I can tell you is that I know Farm Bill's never been negotiated in the press. There'll be the statements that are being made in the press, and we've seen some hard lines being drawn, it seemed, this week, as Brandon mentioned, in some areas. But the constructive discussions, the real negotiations, always take place behind closed doors. And I do think that there is still a real effort and a real commitment by the Big Four, all four of the leaders of the committee, to move in and to get something done. But farm bills are always built on compromise. They're always tough, and I think the toughest thing maybe right now for working to put this bill together is that compromise has been tough, or kind of been a dirty word in the broader body, both the House and the Senate here, this Congress, and in recent years. And I do think that's making it tougher. If it's up to the members of the committee, I think you'll get a good farm bill that has farm in it and nutrition and conservation as well. But those discussions, they're going to occur behind closed doors. It's not going to be in the press or through the press, which is, seem to be a lot of what we've been seeing, particularly this week.
We'll have more from our panel right after this.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Looking closer, seeing further. That's how we do it. At Curious Plot, we're driven to find what's next for agriculture, animal care, and food. We stay curious because that's what it takes to grow understanding. That's how we plot strategies and tell stories that get results time after time. Marketing, communications, and consulting that look closer and see further. Curious Plot. We can't wait to help you tell your story.
Welcome back. The National Grain and Feed Association is one of several organizations supporting recent legislation from Congressman Brad Finstad on cybersecurity in agriculture. NGFA CEO Mike Seyfert says it was an easy decision to support the bill.
DHS has designated food and ag as one of 16 critical infrastructures. We obviously have seen some well-publicized and some not so well-publicized cybersecurity attacks on the food and ag sector over the last couple of years. And we view this legislation as important in that it's not putting any mandates on industry, but it really is working to coordinate and require some actions by USDA and others to take a look at what are the risks to the food and ag sector and what can we be doing to strengthen the security that we have there. We view this legislation as being a real step forward, both in terms of coordination among our federal agencies, taking a real look at what the risks are, and then being able to put out guidance that our members can use to strengthen their systems and the overall food and ag supply chain here in the U.S.
Well, on the broader issue of cybersecurity in general, it seems as if it was a pretty widely discussed topic at one point when we had some very publicized ransomware attacks on some pretty major agribusinesses. But I do wonder, what are your members still telling you about their level of concern about their cybersecurity infrastructure even now today?
Well, I mean, what we hear from our members is obviously keeping up on what the risks are, understanding what the risk may be, and how do they harden their systems? How do they train their employees? How do they protect their systems and their customers? But also a lot of that comes back down to the expertise and the cost of being able to do it. And obviously, this is an area where cyber insurance, we get a lot of questions from our members. How do you deal with cyber insurance? What should they be looking at? What kind of coverages should they be getting? And so those are things that we also try and do and provide those services and direction to our members. But a lot of the concern really comes down to just, particularly for some of our smaller and mid-size, is how do they go about hardening those systems? What should they be doing? Where do they need to be investing their limited resources?
Mm-hmm. Brendan, I want to wrap up the conversation with you and take a look at just kind of the Farm Bill dynamics that we've seen or that we can expect to see here going forward. We did see a number of leadership votes go down on the House floor this week, and we don't need to get into the weeds on the politics of that. But I do want to just discuss the broader dynamic that might mean for farm policy. Any Farm Bill implications you think should be on the radar of farm policy watchers based on the current dynamics on the House and Senate floor?
Spencer, it's a difficult time for Congress to get many things passed, as we've seen with appropriations bills recently. Folks in this country are divided. They've lost the ability to come together and talk. I think Mike mentioned earlier, Ag Committee leadership has not lost that ability. We see it in the press. We see it from a lot of the advocates here in town, but Ag Committee leadership is committed to get a bill. There are paths forward, as you see in the House, a tax bill on a large bipartisan measure made it through. A recent bill on milk in the nutrition space got a huge bipartisan vote in the House. There's opportunities to move this forward. And you hear from Ag Committee leadership on both sides. They care not only about ensuring that farmers are able to produce the food that we need in this country, but that every American has access to food. Sure, there's some policy, some issues, some spending that we need to discuss about how to get there, but I'm bullish on us getting a farm bill. It may take a little time to get through that as we work through things you're advocating for in the press, but I think we'll get a strong farm bill for America's farmers and for all Americans to have access to the nutrition they need.
Well, that is the goal of Ag Committee leaders and something we'll be keeping a close eye on here at Agri-Pulse.com. Brandon, Mike, thanks for joining us. We'll be right back with more Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, but first, our Hannah Pegel walks us through the latest figures on cattle inventory in this week's Ag by the Numbers.
America's cattle herd is shrinking and doesn't show any signs of getting bigger anytime soon. USDA recently put the size of the nation's herd at about 87.2 million as of January 1st, 2% lower than the same time last year. That number is down 15% from 2019, which was the inventory's most recent peak. Beef replacement heifers were reported at 4.8 million head, down 1% year over year. The dairy replacement herd was also a little lower. USDA revised the 2023 calf crop lower than its previous figures to 33.6 million head, a 2% drop from the year prior. The contraction is mainly due to drought and producers taking advantage of solid auction block prices. The current contraction phase of the cattle cycle could last several more years and ultimately impact the balance sheet of packing houses as well as prices at the grocery store. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Hannah Pegel.
It's not as simple just to wake up one day and go, I want to be a conservation farmer. You're changing how your farming practice is done. You're changing your operation.
Farm Credit supported John and Kelly Watley as they shifted to more sustainable farming, improving the environment where they farm and live. Learn more at farmcredit.com/climate.
Don't miss the must-attend policy event of the year. Register now for the 2024 Agri-Pulse Ag and Food Policy Summit. Hear from the diverse players who are trying to revitalize rural revenues as we examine the forward-looking ideas that will drive policy decisions for this year and the decades ahead. The summit takes place on March 18th at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and through our virtual experience. View the agenda and register today under the Events tab at Agri-Pulse.com.
Thanks again for tuning in for another episode of Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. Before we let you go, here's what's on the horizon for the upcoming week. Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack will head to Capitol Hill for a hearing with the House Ag Committee. The next version of the Consumer Price Index is released Tuesday. And finally, I'll be at the National Association of Conservation Districts annual meeting. You can also look for members of our staff at the 100th Annual USDA Ag Outlook Forum Thursday and Friday. We'll continue to follow the latest in farm policy news at agripulse.com. For Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one. Newsmakers is a production of Agri-Pulse Communications. For more ag policy news, visit agripulse.com. You can also find our new content on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow Agri-Pulse and our correspondents on social media to get breaking news and more.